Let's talk about stress. Unfortunately, we are all being bathed in chronic stress literally 24/7. And this is just not healthy. There are certain individuals and groups that are constantly putting out, your environment is very dangerous. Okay, danger, danger, danger. And as we are more exposed to this threat of danger, it can really affect every single system in our body. But there's one thing that's very, very important, and I want to just talk about it. And that really is changing your viewpoint about the environment. I know this might be hard to believe, but your environment is not quite as dangerous as they want you to believe. Now, it is dangerous, don't get me wrong. And there's certain individuals that profit from keeping the public in a fear state. And many times they exaggerate this. And it's just not a healthy thing to keep our attention on this negativity 24/7. So I want you to do something right now. I want you just to look outside right now. Okay. What do you see? You see any dangerous things? I see a tree out there. I don't see any hurricanes, no tsunamis. Looks pretty safe out there. Now look at the ground. Look at the floor right now. Are you sitting on a potential sinkhole right now? Do you feel that there's any termites that have destroyed your foundation that you're going to just cave right in? The answer is no. All right, so go ahead and put your hand on the wall next to you, right? Do you feel it hot, like there's flames, like your house is on fire? No. But if you think about it, if the average person were to just absorb all this threat of danger 24/7, I don't even know how they can survive. So the most important thing to do is to really change your viewpoint and start to filter out some of the things that you're exposed to. Recently, I started to really look at videos I was watching and different TV programs I was watching, and it just hit me how many messages of fear I was exposed to, and without any solutions. So anytime someone gives you some doom and gloom message without a solution, don't watch it. Why? Because now you're going to start solving these problems when you should be sleeping. Now, I'm definitely not saying to ignore some of these dangers, but when you are exposed to these dangers, try like heck to have a relaxed viewpoint, staying in action to help solve the problem, improve things. But at some point, we need to start filtering out this threat of danger because it's just not healthy for our bodies. That also includes the people that you hang out with. I mean, there are so many people out there. I've had people around me that would only give me bad news, okay? Never any good news. You should start watching TV programs and hang out with people that give you solutions, that emphasize the good news, talk about the good things to offset the massive danger signals that our body is constantly being fed. Now, let me just go through a couple things because this is actually a very important topic. You have the sympathetic nervous system, okay? That's the flight or fight, the protective mode that we go into for this threat of stress. And every single cell in our body changes to a whole different program. Whereas the other system called the parasympathetic is all about growth, sleep, digestion, repair, healing. Okay, that's a completely different program. In practice, I used to have a test. It's called a heart rate variability test that would measure how much sympathetic nervous system that was being activated versus how much parasympathetic. And boy, nearly everyone that came in were just so jacked up to the right, which is sympathetic dominance, simply because the environment that we're in was considered extremely dangerous. And I will say a certain amount of that has been manufactured. I mean, if there's not enough things going wrong, to have other people manufacturing more of that is complete insanity. So I think it's important for you to understand what happens to your biology when you are under sustained chronic stress. First of all, you're going to have less diversified microbiome, and you're going to have more pathogenic bacteria. So your entire gut microbiome changes. And all the points I'm going to mention today are based on some research on relating chronic sympathetic high cortisol stress to the various systems of your body. Let's go on to the immune system. What happens to your immune system when you have this sustained stress? It shuts down. The T cells that are normally there to protect you and kill cancer cells and kill viruses are basically put to sleep. The duration of infections take way longer. You have what's called immunosuppression. Stress suppresses the immune system. And this is why when you go to the doctor and you have inflammation or some type of autoimmune, they inject you with prednisone, which takes that away temporarily, because prednisone is a type of cortisol, which is produced by the adrenal glands, which is activated by stress, and that is suppressing all the immune reactions. And as soon as that wears off, you start getting a lot more inflammation. So stress will increase inflammation. All right, what about fertility? Do you become more fertile? No, you become less fertile. You have decreased sperm production. You have less implanting of the egg in the uterus, so you become less fertile. You usually lose your menstrual cycle. And on top of that, you lose your libido. Usually when people are stressed out, they don't have any sex drive. All right, now what happens to the fuel system in your body? Well, if you're trying to be on the ketogenic diet, your whole metabolism shifts back to glucose production. That's right, because cortisol is a glucocorticoid. So it starts to increase gluconeogenesis, the production of new sugar in your liver. So when you go through stress, okay, chronically, what's happening is you're just pumping out all this sugar that's not coming from your diet. It's coming from your proteins, the muscle proteins in your butt, the muscle proteins in your legs, and even fat and ketones are turned into glucose. And that glucose can then increase insulin and you increase your risk of getting a diabetes. Now, why is this? Because when you're in stress mode, your body needs this quick energy. What about lipids like cholesterol and things like that? This is interesting. When you go through chronic stress, your triglycerides go up, your HDL goes down, your LDL goes up. And if you had these large buoyant particle size type LDL, that's going to switch to the small dense particle size, which are the more pathogenic ones that actually can invade the arteries. So your profile for cholesterol gets much worse when you go through stress. Like I said before, having a non-serious, relaxed state of mind is so important. Now, this next one is really interesting too. Your ability to detoxify. I'm talking about these certain enzymes in your liver. They're called cytochrome P450 phase 1, phase 2 enzymes, okay? These are the enzymes that convert poisons into harmless, water-soluble things that can be released from the body. So we're going from fat-soluble poisons to harmless particles, right? Well, guess what? Those are inhibited when you go through chronic stress. Wild. So you can't detoxify that well. So you're going to hold toxins. Right? What about digestion as a whole? Well, you're going to have much slower digestion. You're not going to be able to release the bile salts from your liver, which is interesting. So there goes the fat digestion. Even your pancreatic enzymes and your enzymes from your small intestine will be inhibited, thereby cutting down your ability to digest. Your production of hydrochloric acid is going to go down too. So there goes your complete digestion of proteins, your absorption of minerals, and the killing of pathogens. Your mucus lining in the stomach, in the small intestine, and the large bowel is inhibited by this stress state as well. And that's kind of like the immune barrier. And then your overall absorption of vitamins and minerals are going to be lessened. Now, this next one is also interesting. Vitamin D absorption. There's a receptor for vitamin D called the vitamin D receptor, okay? And the reception or the absorption of vitamin D through that receptor is diminished with stress. On top of all the other barriers with vitamin D, stress will actually slow down the absorption of vitamin D. Wild. Even the fascia, kind of like the stuff that surrounds the muscles, that's highly innervated by your nerves, and your brain has a lot of information coming down to the fascia around the ligaments, around your muscles, becomes tighter, becomes more restricted. You lose your range of motion. You lose your blood flow to your fascia when you're under chronic stress. You maintain this posture right here, right? Which is kind of like in protect mode. This is your flight or fight. You know, your posture starts going down, and it all has to do with that fascia. Now, what happens to the brain when you're under chronic, sustained sympathetic nervous system overdrive? Well, the hippocampus, The structure that's involved with the relay of memories and learning and cognition is all inhibited because that part of the brain starts to shrink. Also, it starts lowering the function of your cerebral cortex. You kind of need that part of the brain. Now, another structure is activated in your brain. And I don't know if you ever heard about the structure, but it's called the amygdala. The amygdala has everything to do with fear and anxiety, okay? It's kind of like your adrenal glands, but in the brain. So it's going to react to stress states. Now, as far as thinking in a chronic state of stress, you're not going to be really analytically thinking about things, solving problems, coming up with good solutions, being creative, having imagination. Instead, it's going to be more like reaction mode, because you need a relaxed state of mind to come up with solutions. You need your creativity to come up with really good strategies and solutions. Last point I want to bring up is your genes. What happens to your genes when you're under stress? Well, all the bad genes get activated, okay? And all the good genes get suppressed. Like I'm talking about activation of cancer genes. I'm talking about activation of inflammatory genes, things like that. But one thing I want to bring up, your genes really don't cause anything, okay? They don't cause the problems for you. It's the epigenetics, which means above genetics. It's your lifestyle that's really behind these genetics. And all you need to understand is how to turn on and turn off certain genes. And those switches are activated by certain lifestyle changes. And I cover these lifestyle changes in a lot of my videos. The genes are associated with a lot of bad things, but if you know how to control your genes, you're totally going to be in the driver's seat. Number one, we must change our attitude, our viewpoint of our environment. We must also start filtering out how much threat of danger we're exposed to. If you start watching certain videos that don't give you a solution, that at the end of the video, you feel worse than before you watch the video, then you might need to filter those things out. A therapy for me is getting out in nature, getting a lot of space as much as possible, and really kind of getting connected to my environment. Now, the other thing to do is to physically flush out a lot of this extra adrenaline and this extra cortisol that has been accumulated through the day of exposure to all these things. So this means routine, consistent exercise, okay, physical work outside. So you can start flushing out these neurotransmitters and hormones that are creating a lot of this damage, because the last thing you want to do is go through a lot of mental stress and then just go to bed at night. You're not going to sleep that well. So exercise is a necessity. I mean, I have to physically work out every single day just to kind of flush out things and help me sleep. Because the other point about the adrenaline and cortisol, it's shifting a lot of energy, okay, that should be in your immune system, should be in repair, should be in your digestion, and it's ending up in the muscles. So you have enough energy to run away from the tiger, right? But because there's no more tiger around, we have more mental energy, and that whole mechanism is still there. So you're going to have to exercise to get those hormones out of your system. Now, that being said, there's a lot of additional things you can do to help with stress. Not as important as changing your viewpoint, but they're still important. And I put that video up right here. Check it out.